Serena Davis had just transferred to a new school. She came from a place where survival meant learning to fight, where 8 years of mixed martial arts had turned her fists into weapons, a black belt wrapped in teenage silence. But the bullies didn't notice that. They only saw a quiet black girl, alone, an easy target. They came at her with demands and threats, pushing further every day. Then one afternoon, they crossed a line. Laughter filled the air. Someone said she deserved it. The hallway watched, but Serena didn't flinch. They thought she was weak. They thought she'd cave. They were wrong. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from and make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's story is one you won't want to miss. The first day at Hillcrest High School was uneventful, in the way most first days are for new students. A blur of faces, lockers slamming, the echo of unfamiliar voices drifting down the crowded hallways. Serena Davis didn't expect much. She wasn't there to make friends. She was just there to survive, to make it through without drawing too much attention. Serena's quiet, calculated demeanor didn't come from a desire to be left alone. It came from necessity. In her previous school, back in Brooklyn, blending had been a survival tactic. She had learned that when you're a black girl in a new environment, sometimes silence is the best armor. Her thoughts were interrupted as the final bell rang, signaling the start of lunch. She grabbed her things slowly, pausing at her locker. The hallway began to clear, the students rushing toward the cafeteria or wherever their social circles took them. Serena didn't have a group. She was just one of the many loners, drifting in and out of the background, unnoticed. Or so she thought. As she made her way through the hall, a group of boys caught her eye. Kyle, the tall, athletic one with a cocky grin. Ethan, his lanky sidekick, and the others who followed in Kyle's wake, like shadows. Serena had seen them earlier in the day. Loud, arrogant, the type that wore their popularity like a crown. They looked like trouble. The group, noticing Serena walking alone, began to follow her. It wasn't overt at first, just a few comments thrown in her direction, low enough that she could pretend she hadn't heard. Kyle, hey, look, it's the new girl. What's she doing all the way over here? Ethan, is she lost? Doesn't look like she belongs. Serena quickened her pace, hoping to reach the cafeteria without drawing any more attention. She wasn't afraid of them, not yet, but she could feel their eyes on her, sizing her up. Kyle's voice called after her again. Kyle, hey, you're Serena, right? You don't look like the kind of girl who'd eat in the cafeteria. You must think you're better than us, huh? Serena felt the tension building in her chest. She wasn't going to be a target. Not here. Not again. She had dealt with enough of that in the past. But she kept walking, her body language neutral, her mind focused. They followed her all the way into the cafeteria, and she could hear their mocking laughter behind her. They were already beginning to form their judgment of her, the quiet black girl who didn't fit in. Serena chose a seat in the corner, away from the chaos, and tried to make herself as small as possible. She had learned to avoid confrontation when she could, but she also knew the truth. Bullies don't leave you alone unless you make them. Kyle, seeing that she was alone, walked up to her table. Ethan close behind. The others stood back, but their eyes were on Serena. Kyle, what's up, Serena? You're the new girl, right? Why are you sitting here all by yourself? Serena didn't answer immediately. She just kept eating her lunch, her expression calm, her hands steady as they moved the food to her mouth. She could feel Kyle getting closer, his presence looming over her. Kyle, I said, what's up? You think you're too good for us? Is that it? Serena's grip tightened slightly around her drink, but she didn't flinch. She knew that if she let them see her react, they'd have power over her. She refused to give them that satisfaction. But Kyle wasn't finished. He leaned over her table, trying to invade her space, his breath hot against her face. Kyle, what's wrong, huh? Cat got your tongue. Serena put her drink down slowly, her eyes meeting his for the first time. She didn't say anything immediately. She simply looked at him, scanning his face with quiet assessment. The group was taken aback by the intensity of her gaze. Serena, I'm just eating lunch. Kyle, you should be careful where you eat. Not everyone in this school is as nice as me. He reached forward and pushed her tray of food to the side, spilling the contents across the table. The cafeteria fell silent, a few heads turning to witness the interaction. Serena's eyes didn't leave his, and in that moment, a quiet, dangerous calm settled over her. Ethan laughed from behind Kyle, egging him on. "Ethan, you should teach her a lesson, Kyle. She needs to know her place." Serena remained still, her gaze unwavering. She didn't say a word. Her breath was slow, steady. But in the pit of her stomach, something shifted, a quiet warning to herself. This wasn't Brooklyn. This wasn't the place where she had learned to fight and survive. This was something different, but she would face it the same way. Kyle, sensing that Serena wasn't reacting the way he expected, took a step closer. His hand hovered over the edge of her chair, and with a quick shove, he knocked her out of it, sending her tumbling to the floor. The cafeteria fell silent, momentarily stunned. Serena lay there, her body still for a second before she quickly regained her footing. "Kyle, what's wrong, huh? You're gonna cry now." Serena didn't answer. She stood up slowly, deliberately. The cafeteria had fallen silent now, the other students watching with bated breath. "Kyle, you really think you can stand up to me?" Serena's eyes never left his. Her fists were clenched at her sides, but they weren't shaking. "Serena, if you want to try me, I'm right here." Kyle's face contorted with rage, and for a moment, he seemed to be weighing his options. The room was still silent, waiting. Serena stood perfectly still, her posture straight, every muscle in her body coiled like a spring. But the bullies didn't realize, that they had crossed the wrong line. Kyle's hands clenched into fists. He moved toward Serena as if to shove her again, but before he could take another step, Serena was already moving. It wasn't fast, but it was fluid, with a quick pivot. She stepped to the side, grabbing his wrist and twisting it behind his back. The crowd gasped in unison, stunned into silence as Kyle's face went from smug confidence to shock. Serena's voice, calm and collected, cut through the tension. "Serena, you made a mistake." She released him just enough to let him stumble back. Kyle's face was pale now, and the room erupted into a mix of shock, awe, and whispers. The bullies, once so confident, stood there in stunned silence, unsure what just happened. Serena stood, her body tense but under control, her chest rising and falling with steady breaths. Kyle didn't try to retaliate. Instead, he backed away, his eyes wide and embarrassed. Serena stood there, watching him carefully. Ethan and the others didn't move either, their bravado gone. Serena took a step back, turning her gaze toward the cafeteria exit. The room was still buzzing with whispers as she walked calmly toward the door, leaving the bullies standing there, unsure and humiliated. As Serena walked down the hallway toward the exit, she felt the weight of the moment. She didn't need to prove anything. The fight had been short, simple, and effective, but there was a deeper satisfaction in knowing that, for once, she hadn't been the one who was silenced. Her calmness in the face of aggression had turned the tables. She wasn't a victim. She was Serena Davis, a black belt in more ways than one. The next few days at Hillcrest High were oddly quiet. The whispers about the confrontation in the cafeteria buzzed through the halls, but Serena was no longer a target. The boys who had once tried to humiliate her now gave her a wide berth, unsure how to approach someone who had so easily turned their bullying on its head. Serena kept her head down, walking the halls with a newfound sense of ease. Her calm demeanor was the same, but the difference was subtle. There was a quiet respect that followed her now. She didn't need to prove herself to anyone. She had done that without saying a word. Yet, despite the peace that seemed to settle over her, the tension was still palpable. The look in Kyle's eyes when he backed off that day lingered in Serena's mind. It wasn't fear. It wasn't even respect. It was humiliation. She had stripped him of his power, with nothing more than her presence. And it was that moment that made her realize the weight of what had just happened. On the third day after the cafeteria incident, Serena found herself walking to gym class, her mind preoccupied with everything that had transpired. She wasn't surprised when she saw Kyle waiting at the gym doors, talking with some of his friends, but she did feel the shift in the air. He wasn't laughing anymore, wasn't making jokes about her. Instead, he watched her as she approached, a mixture of reluctance and curiosity in his gaze. He stepped aside as she walked past him, his eyes lingering on her. She didn't slow down, didn't give him the satisfaction of a glance. It was then that Serena realized. The school had changed. The students were no longer just glancing at her in confusion or pity. They were watching her with respect, wondering who she was and what she could do. Gym class was the usual, chaotic mess of noise and activity. Serena walked into the gymnasium and immediately saw the familiar faces. Kids and their cliques, some laughing, some pretending not to care, but all too aware of each other. She slid into the locker room, changed quickly, and when she walked out, she was met with a few curious stares. Serena felt the weight of their gazes, but she didn't let it faze her. She wasn't here to prove herself to anyone. She was just here for the class. Coach Jacobs, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a no-nonsense attitude, clapped his hands, rallying the students to gather in front of him. Coach Jacobs, all right, team. Today we're doing a little warm-up competition, basketball. But here's the deal. This isn't about just running up and shooting. I want to see hustle. I want to see teamwork. And most importantly, I want to see some heart. The students groaned collectively. Basketball wasn't their favorite, but they all knew Coach Jacobs meant business. As the class began to split into teams, Serena noticed that Kyle and his friends had been placed on the opposite side of the gym, far from where she stood. She was paired with a few other students, most of whom had avoided her until now. They seemed a little unsure of her presence, her quiet confidence, her intensity, but they didn't say anything. Serena wasn't looking for validation. She just wanted to finish the class and move on. But as the game started, she found herself being watched. The court, once just another mundane part gym class, now felt different. Her every move seemed amplified. Every time she dribbled past a teammate or blocked an opponent's shot, she could feel the stares. And then it happened. Kyle's team had the ball, and the game was getting competitive. Kyle, eager to prove he wasn't afraid of her, made his move, rushing towards Serena with the ball in hand. His eyes locked onto hers, a cocky grin spreading across his face. Kyle, you're not going to block me this time, new girl. Serena didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her body was already in motion. She sidestepped him with fluid grace, effortlessly stealing the ball from his hands and sending it to her teammate. Kyle stumbled, frustrated, as she calmly walked away from him, her gaze never leaving the game. Ethan, still on Kyle's side, made an attempt to retaliate, rushing toward her as well. But Serena anticipated it. With a quick feint, she moved out of his way, and with a single swift motion, stole the ball again. Kyle, growing angrier by the second, pushed through the crowd and stepped directly in front of Serena, blocking her path. He was nearly chest to chest with her now, his fists clenched. Kyle, you think you're tough, huh? Think you can just walk in here and show me up? Serena didn't back down. She didn't even look at him. She glanced at her teammates, who were watching her in silent awe, before she turned back to Kyle. Serena, I'm just playing the game. But Kyle wasn't done. His frustration got the best of him, and he pushed her this time, harder than he ever had before. Serena, caught off guard by the sudden aggression, took a step back, her balance shifting. Before anyone could react, Serena's instincts kicked in. With a swift movement, she turned her body and locked his arm behind his back, flipping him over her shoulder in one smooth motion, sending him crashing to the floor. The gym went dead silent. Serena stood over him for a moment, watching as he struggled to get up, humiliated. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She had already proven her point. Coach Jacobs, who had been watching from the sidelines, walked over, shaking his head with a small smile on his face. Coach Jacobs, all right, that's enough. Serena, nice job. The rest of the class stood in stunned silence, but Serena simply nodded, returning to her side of the gym, the ball in hand. Her teammates, once hesitant, now gave her hesitant nods of approval, even though they didn't quite know what had just happened. Kyle stayed on the floor for a moment longer, his pride shattered. Ethan helped him up, both of them unsure what to do next. Serena didn't even look back at them. By the end of gym class, word had spread. The bullies, the jocks, the popular kids, none of them were looking at her the same way anymore. Kyle and his friends, once the untouchables of Hillcrest High, now knew the truth. Serena wasn't just a new girl. She wasn't just a target. She was someone who could hold her own, someone they wouldn't be able to push around so easily. When Serena walked out of the gym, the hallway had already started to quiet. The stairs followed her, but now they weren't filled with mockery. They were filled with something else. Respect, maybe even fear. She wasn't just the girl who had been shoved around anymore. She was the girl who had taken control. And for the first time since she had walked into Hillcrest High, Serena Davis felt like she belonged. The next few days at Hillcrest High were filled with an uneasy quiet. Serena's reputation had already spread through the school like wildfire. The confrontation with Kyle in gym class had sealed it. No one was going to mess with her now. The whispers were no longer about the new girl. Now they were about what she was: quiet, deadly, and someone you didn't want to provoke. But there was a lingering energy in the school, something between fear and curiosity, that Serena couldn't ignore. Every time she walked into a room, the eyes followed her. The tension wasn't gone. It had shifted. Serena had learned early that being alone could be a powerful thing. People didn't notice you until you became something they couldn't ignore. She didn't want to be the center of attention, but she wasn't about to back down. Her focus wasn't on the students who gossip about her behind her back, but on making it through her senior year without being dragged into anyone else's drama. But drama had a way of finding her, no matter how hard she tried to avoid it. It was lunch hour again, and Serena was sitting at her usual spot in the cafeteria, a small corner by the window, away from the crowds. Her meal was simple: a salad and a bottle of water. She had always been an introvert, and she preferred the stillness of her own company. Plus, the view from a window allowed her to escape into her thoughts. But that day, the peace didn't last long. As she took a bite of her salad, Serena saw the familiar group approaching her. Kyle, Ethan, and the rest of his crew walked toward her table, their eyes locked onto hers. Serena didn't flinch. She didn't even change her posture. She stayed calm, hoping they would just move on. Kyle, however, wasn't ready to let go of the humiliation from gym class. He didn't know what had shifted in the school's social dynamic, but he couldn't let go of the fact that a quiet girl had knocked him down in front of everyone. He wasn't going to let her get away with it so easily. Kyle, well, if it isn't the great Serena Davis, thinking she can just show up here and take over. Serena's eyes never left her salad as she chewed. She didn't respond, just waiting for him to say whatever it was he was going to say. The table of boys behind him snickered, clearly unsure what to do now that they knew Serena wasn't the easy target they thought she'd be. But Kyle wasn't ready to give up. Kyle, you think you're tough, huh? You think because you took me down once, you can walk around here like you own the place? Serena put her fork down slowly, her calmness never wavering. Serena, I never wanted to own anything. I'm just here to get through the day. Kyle stepped closer, his chest puffing out with false bravado. He was trying to regain control of the situation, to remind everyone that he was still in charge. Kyle, you think you won? You think I'm just going to forget what happened? The tension in the air thickened, and Serena felt her muscles tighten, but she kept her voice steady. Serena, if you're looking for a fight, Kyle, I'm not the one to keep pushing. For a moment, there was silence. The cafeteria felt smaller, the murmurs of other students growing distant as the moment dragged on. Serena didn't move. Her hands rested on the table, her gaze unwavering. And then, just as the situation was about to escalate, Coach Jacobs appeared at the edge of the cafeteria, his presence commanding. Coach Jacobs. Kyle, I've got your attention now, don't I? Take a step back. Kyle's posture faltered for a moment. Coach Jacobs didn't tolerate disruptions in the cafeteria. Not for jocks, not for anyone. Coach Jacobs. Serena, you're good. Kyle, I suggest you walk away before you make things worse. Kyle opened his mouth to protest, but Coach Jacobs cut him off with a sharp look, one that made him think twice. Slowly, Kyle took a step back, his face flushed with frustration and humiliation. Kyle, this isn't over, Davis. Serena didn't respond. She didn't need to. She had already won. The rest of the lunch period passed in uneasy silence. Serena continued eating, her body still, her mind focused. The other students had turned back to their lunches, but their conversations had slowed, and many eyes were still on her. They hadn't seen what happened in the cafeteria between Kyle and Serena, but they'd seen enough to know she wasn't someone to mess with. As the bell rang, signaling the end of lunch, Serena gathered her things and stood up, slipping her backpack over her shoulder. She was about to leave when she heard someone call her name from behind. A voice. Talia, a girl Serena hadn't spoken to much but had seen around the school. She was part of the group of students who had quietly respected Serena since the incident in gym class. Talia. Hey, Serena. Serena turned, her gaze meeting Talia's. Talia smiled, a soft, almost apologetic expression on her face. Talia, you all right? That was something today. I just want to say, you don't have to deal with Kyle and his crew if you don't want to. You've got people here who've got your back. Serena nodded slowly, a small smile tugging at her lips. She didn't know why, but it felt good to hear that. It felt good to know that someone recognized the strength it took to stand up, even in the face of fear. Serena, thanks, Talia, but I can handle it. Talia, yeah, I know you can, but just in case you need a friend, I'm here. With that, Serena nodded and turned, heading toward her next class. That afternoon, Serena felt a shift in the atmosphere. For the first time since arriving at Hillcrest High, she didn't feel like an outsider. The students who had once whispered about her now watched her with a mixture of admiration and awe. It wasn't the kind of attention she was looking for, but she knew it was necessary. She wasn't a new girl anymore. She wasn't the quiet girl everyone thought they could walk all over. Serena Davis had become someone to be reckoned with, someone whose silence was more powerful than anyone had realized. And as the final bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, Serena Davis walked out of Hillcrest High, her shoulders back, her head held high. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. Serena walked home from school that afternoon, the weight of the day pressing on her mind. Despite the victory in the cafeteria and the relief of not having to deal with Kyle and his crew for a while, something lingered in the back of her mind. She knew that sooner or later, the bullies would come back, and when they did, they wouldn't be content with just trying to push her around. They would escalate. Back in Brooklyn, she had learned to read people, the way they moved, the way their eyes flicked to certain things. She knew that Kyle wasn't finished with her. People like him never were. When she arrived at her apartment, she took a deep breath. Her mother was out, likely working her late shift, as usual. Serena appreciated the quiet. The only sound was a faint hum of the refrigerator and the distant honk of cars on the street. It was the kind of silence she had grown used to, the kind that came with keeping to yourself. But despite the calm, her mind was racing. She knew she couldn't keep avoiding things. Avoiding confrontation. Avoiding the way people saw her. The stares. The rumors. The assumptions. She walked into the small living room and sat down at the kitchen table, opening her book bag and pulling out her journal. Writing always helped her process things, especially when they were as complicated as this. She flipped to a blank page and began to write. I'm not weak. I'm not invisible. I'm not afraid of them. But I'm not going to let anyone define me. Not Kyle, not anyone. The words flowed onto the page, and for a moment, she felt the pressure in her chest ease. The fight wasn't just external, it was internal. And until she found peace with herself, she knew things would continue to feel out of control. The following morning, Serena walked to school with a different mindset. She had spent the night reflecting on everything. The bullies, the social hierarchy at Hillcrest, the way people constantly try to pigeonhole her into a category. Serena wasn't just a quiet black girl. She was someone who had the strength to fight back, but also the wisdom to know when to walk away. But that morning, as she stepped through the school's front doors, she could feel it. The air was charged, thick with expectation. It was as if everyone was waiting for the next move. What would she do? How would she respond? The world was watching her closely now. The way she carried herself, the way she reacted to pressure. She walked to her locker, feeling eyes on her from every direction. For a moment, she felt the weight of it all, the quiet judgments, the whispered conversations. She turned the lock, her fingers moving automatically, but her mind was elsewhere. Then she heard it. Kyle's voice. "Kyle, hey, Davis." She didn't turn around. She didn't need to. She already knew who it was. Kyle's voice had lost the edge of arrogance it once had. Now it was tinged with something else. Something darker. The humiliation of losing in front of the whole school had cracked his facade. "Kyle, you think you won? You really think that moment in the gym class means something?" Serena closed her locker slowly, taking a deep breath before turning to face him. "Kyle, I'm not done with you." Serena's eyes were calm, unflinching. She stood tall, her posture firm and controlled. She had learned something in the past few days. The bullies only held power if you let them. If you gave them the reaction they wanted, they would feed on it. But if you didn't react, if you stood your ground, they had nothing. "Serena, I'm not looking for a fight. But if you want one, we can go another round. I'll leave it up to you." Kyle stared at her for a moment, as if trying to gauge her sincerity. For a split second, Serena saw the doubt in his eyes, the hesitation, the uncertainty. Kyle wasn't as confident as he used to be. He was scared, and he knew he had lost more than just a fight. He had lost his place in the social hierarchy of Hillcrest High. But Kyle didn't back down. His pride wouldn't allow it. He stepped forward, his fists clenched. "Kyle, you think you're better than me? You think you can just walk through this school and no one's going to challenge you?" Serena's eyes softened, but she didn't flinch. She wasn't afraid of him. She wasn't afraid of anyone anymore. "Serena, you're not my problem, Kyle. You never were. The only problem is that you won't leave me alone. You can keep fighting for your position, but I'm not interested in playing." And just like that, Serena turned her back on him, walking down the hallway without looking back. The silence in the hallways was deafening. She could feel the eyes on her, the weight of every single student's gaze. But she didn't care. Serena Davis had taken control. The ball was no longer in Kyle's court. It was in hers. It didn't take long for Serena to realize something. People were starting to respect her. It wasn't just because she had knocked Kyle down or because she had held her ground. It was something deeper, something intangible. Serena wasn't just a victim anymore. She wasn't just a quiet girl who got pushed around. She was a force, and she had the power to change the game. One day, during a free period, Serena sat alone in the library, reading a book. The library had become her sanctuary, the one place where she could find peace, where no one would approach her with their judgments or their problems. She had come to appreciate the silence of it all. But this time, as she flipped through the pages of her book, someone approached her. She looked up, surprised to see Talia, the girl from the cafeteria, standing there, a shy smile on her face. "Talia, hey, Serena, got a minute?" Serena raised an eyebrow. Her interest piqued. "Serena, for you?" "Of course." Talia stepped forward, sitting across from her. For a moment, neither of them spoke, the silence between them comfortable but full of unsaid words. Finally, Talia broke the quiet. "Talia, I just wanted to say, I've been watching you, you know? You got this whole aura about you, the way you handle yourself. People have been talking about you, but not in a bad way. You've kind of changed everything around here." Serena wasn't sure what to say. She wasn't used to compliments, and she wasn't sure if Talia was being sincere. "Serena, I'm just trying to make it through the year." "Talia, yeah, but you're doing it in a way no one else can. I respect that. Honestly, Kyle and the guys, everyone's scared of you now, but not in a bad way. They're just realizing that they can't mess with you anymore." Serena looked down at her book for a moment, letting the words sink in. She had never considered what it would feel like to be respected, to have people see her as more than just a quiet girl. "Talia, and if you ever need anything at all, I've got your back." Serena felt a warmth spread through her chest at the sincerity in Talia's voice. For the first time since she arrived at Hillcrest High, she realized that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't so alone anymore. The next few weeks at Hillcrest High felt like a quiet revolution. The students, especially the ones who had once dismissed Serena as the quiet new girl, began to look at her differently. Word had spread about the way she'd handled Kyle in the cafeteria, and it seemed like every corner she turned, someone was quietly acknowledging her strength. The undercurrent of tension had shifted. No longer was she the outsider. Now, she was someone people respected, whether they liked it or not. But not everyone had adjusted. Kyle, still simmering with resentment, was waiting for the right moment to reassert himself. And it seemed that moment was just around the corner. It happened one afternoon, as Serena walked down the hall toward her next class. Her headphones were in, blocking out the noise of the bustling school around her. She was used to the stares by now, the occasional whispers, but the subtle change in the atmosphere made her feel a little more at ease. She reached the door to her next class when she felt it, a shove from behind. It wasn't gentle. It was hard and deliberate. Serena stumbled forward, barely catching herself on the doorframe. She turned around quickly, her heart pounding, to find Kyle standing there, his face twisted with anger. "Kyle, you think you won, huh? You think you can just walk around here acting like you're untouchable?" The hallway fell silent. Serena could feel the eyes of the students around her, watching, waiting. Kyle's friends, hanging in the background, barely moved. They were just there for the spectacle. Serena didn't flinch. She straightened up, pushing her hair back from her face. Her eyes met Kyle's with calm determination. "Serena, I'm not untouchable, Kyle. But I've made it clear. I won't let you push me around anymore." Kyle stepped closer, his voice low and dangerous. "Kyle, I've been thinking about what you did to me. In gym, in front of everyone. You made a fool of me. And now I'm going to make sure everyone knows you're not as tough as you think you are." The threat in his words was clear, but Serena didn't show fear. She could feel the tension building, and she knew that if she reacted, if she let him see any sign of weakness, he would win. "Serena, you don't get it, do you? You think this is about you. But it's not. It's about respect. Something you don't know anything about." She didn't wait for his response. With one last glance, she turned and walked into the classroom, leaving Kyle and his friends standing in the hallway. She didn't feel the need to prove herself anymore. She knew who she was. And Kyle? He was just a boy who had nothing left to lose but his pride. Days passed, and Serena was able to move through school with a renewed sense of calm. Her reputation was solidified, and even Kyle seemed to have backed off, though she could tell he was still fuming. His friends weren't as eager to pick on her, either. They'd seen what she could do, and none of them wanted to be on the receiving end of it. But then one Friday afternoon, just as the final bell rang and students began flooding out of classrooms, Serena's phone buzzed with a message from Talia. "Talia, meet me at the park after school. I need to talk to you. It's important." Serena's first instinct was to dismiss it. She had her own plans to relax and wind down, but something in the message felt urgent. Talia didn't often reach out like this. After a moment's hesitation, Serena decided to go. The park was a 10-minute walk from the school. As she walked through the trees and past the playground, Serena spotted Talia sitting on one of the benches, her hands clasped tightly together. There was something different in her demeanor, a seriousness that Serena hadn't seen before. "Serena, hey, what's up? You sounded pretty urgent in the message." Talia looked up at her, her face pale. She seemed hesitant to speak at first, her eyes darting to the ground, then back to Serena. "Talia, I don't know how to say this, but Kyle's not done with you. He's planning something. I overheard him talking with some of his friends after class. He's been trying to get the others to rally against you. He's spreading lies about you." Serena's breath caught in her throat. She had expected this. She had known it wouldn't end just with the quiet stares or the occasional taunts. Kyle wasn't just embarrassed. He was bitter. And bitter people, especially those with power, don't let things go easily. "Serena, what kind of lies?" "Talia, he's telling everyone you're a troublemaker, that you're the one who's always looking for a fight, that you've been causing chaos in the school, that you're trying to make the jocks look bad." Serena felt a tightening in her chest. She knew exactly what Kyle was doing. He was trying to turn the students against her, make her the villain, and give himself the role of the victim. "Talia, I didn't want you to be blindsided. I thought you should know." Serena stared at the ground for a long moment. She had known the peace wouldn't last. She had known Kyle wasn't going to let her get away without a fight, but she wasn't afraid. She never had been. Serena, thanks for letting me know. Talia, I can handle it. Talia's expression softened, relief washing over her. She gave Serena a supportive smile. Talia, I knew you would. You've got this. Serena nodded, standing up from the bench. She felt a renewed sense of determination bubbling inside her. She wasn't going to let Kyle control her. She wasn't going to let him or anyone else define her. The next day, Serena walked into Hillcrest High with a sense of purpose. She could already feel the tension in the air. There was something different today. It was as if the entire school was waiting for something to happen. She walked through the hallways, her eyes scanning the faces of students who whispered as she passed. She could feel their stares. But this time, they didn't feel like judgment. They felt like anticipation. Serena had earned their respect, and she knew it. She had also earned Kyle's ire. And now, he was coming for her. By Monday morning, the entire school had shifted its focus onto Serena. Word spread about the lies Kyle had been spreading. The smear campaign that had painted her as a troublemaker, as someone who thrived on chaos. Serena didn't need to hear the whispers to know what was happening. She could feel in the air the electric buzz of gossip, the tension that had settled over Hillcrest High. Her reputation had been a double-edged sword. On one side, she was admired, even respected by some. But on the other side, the lies Kyle had spread about her were starting to take root. The students who once viewed her as untouchable were now questioning her motives. The dynamic was changing again, and for the first time, Serena began to feel the weight of it. She walked into the school that morning, her head held high, but inside, a storm was brewing. She had been through too much to let this define her, but she couldn't help feeling the pressure. The hallway seemed quieter than usual. Students shot her sidelong glances, some of them whispering under their breath. They weren't sure what to believe anymore. Serena's first class passed in a blur. She could barely focus on the lesson, her thoughts constantly drifting back to the confrontation that was inevitable. She knew she'd have to face Kyle head-on, but part of her wanted to avoid the entire situation. She didn't like being the center of attention. She didn't want to be caught in the middle of some petty high school drama. But she also knew this had become bigger than just Kyle and his friends. This was about who she was, about standing firm in the face of lies and manipulation. By lunchtime, Serena found herself in the cafeteria, sitting alone as usual. She'd grown accustomed to it by now. Most of the students gave her space, though their curiosity still lingered in the air. As she picked at her lunch, she heard a familiar voice call out to her from behind. Talia, Serena. Serena looked up, surprised to see Talia walking toward her. She had been avoiding her the past few days, unsure of how to navigate the situation. But Talia was standing there now, a determined look on her face. Talia, I just wanted to check on you. Are you okay? I know things are a little crazy right now. Serena gave her a small smile, grateful for the concern, but she didn't let her guard down completely. Serena, I'll be fine. I'm used to this. Talia, no, you're not. No one should have to go through what you're going through. You've done nothing wrong. Everyone knows that. You just have to keep your head up, and soon they'll realize the truth. Serena looked down at her lunch, trying to ignore the growing knot in her stomach. She wasn't sure what the truth was anymore. She had been doing everything she could to stay out of the drama, but somehow it kept finding her. Her whole high school experience had been defined by people who couldn't leave her alone, couldn't see past the surface. And now, with Kyle's lies spreading like wildfire, it felt like everything was slipping out of her control. Serena, I don't know if they'll ever realize the truth. It feels like no matter what I do, it's never enough. Talia sat down across from her, her face serious. Talia, then let me help you. Let's prove Kyle wrong. Let's show everyone who you really are. Serena looked up at Talia, surprised by the offer. She had expected sympathy, but not this kind of support. Serena had always handled things on her own, but there was something about Talia's words that made her pause. Talia, you don't have to carry this burden alone. People are watching. They're waiting to see how you respond to all this. And they're starting to see you as more than just the quiet girl. You've got this. Serena felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. For the first time in a long while, the weight on her shoulders seemed a little lighter. Maybe Talia was right. Maybe this was her chance to take control of her narrative. She wasn't going to let Kyle define her anymore. Serena, okay, let's do it. I'm done letting him control this. The final bell rang, and Serena stood in the hallway, her heart pounding in her chest. This was it. She knew it was coming, but the reality of it still hit her with a sense of dread. Kyle was waiting for her. He stood by the lockers, surrounded by his usual crew, his arms crossed, a smug grin on his face. The rest of the students had already gathered around, sensing the tension in the air. Everyone knew what was about to happen. Serena could feel the eyes of the entire school on her, but this time, it didn't scare her. It didn't faze her. Serena walked toward Kyle, her steps purposeful and steady. His friends parted to make way for her, but Kyle didn't budge. He didn't move a muscle, waiting for her to make the first move. Kyle, well, if it isn't the quiet troublemaker, trying to act like she's some kind of hero. Serena stopped in front of him, her eyes locked on his. She could see the anger in his gaze, the way his hands were clenched into fists. But she wasn't intimidated. Not anymore. Serena, you can say whatever you want about me, Kyle, but you don't get to control how this ends. Kyle, oh? And what's that supposed to mean? Serena stood tall, her voice calm but steady. Serena, it means I'm done letting you play games. I'm done being your punching bag. You can keep spreading your lies, keep trying to make me the villain, but you're only making yourself look worse. There was a brief silence as Kyle absorbed her words, and for a second, she thought he might back down. But his pride was too strong. He wouldn't give up. Not now. Not after everything that had happened. Kyle, you think you won? You think people are going to start believing you over me? Serena didn't respond right away. She didn't need to. The silence between them spoke volumes. Her calmness was a stark contrast to his rage. He was out of control, and she was steady, unshaken. Finally, Serena spoke, her voice unwavering. Serena, I don't need anyone to believe me. I'm not doing this for them. I'm doing this for me. You can keep trying to tear me down, Kyle, but you'll never break me. And with that, Serena turned and walked away, her back straight, her heart pounding with a quiet satisfaction. She didn't need to say anything more. The words had been spoken. The lines had been drawn. The next few weeks were quieter than Serena had expected. The lies about her began to lose their power, and the students who had once doubted her now saw her for who she truly was. They saw the strength in her silence, the determination in the way she carried herself. Serena didn't need to fight. She had already won. Kyle, on the other hand, seemed to disappear from the scene. His friends, once eager to follow him, had begun to distance themselves. He had lost his power, and with it, his place in the school's social hierarchy. Serena wasn't just a bystander in her own story anymore. She had taken control of her narrative. By the end of the school year, Serena had found a sense of peace she hadn't known was possible. Hillcrest High had become a place where she wasn't just surviving, she was thriving. Her name wasn't synonymous with bullying or chaos. It was synonymous with strength, with grace under pressure. She had taken back her life, and she had done it on her own terms. As the final bell rang on the last day of school, Serena walked out of Hillcrest High, her head held high. She had changed the game. She had faced her bullies, stood her ground, and come out stronger on the other side. And for the first time in a long time, Serena felt like she truly belonged. It was a few weeks after the tension with Kyle had died down, but Serena could feel it in the air again. The last days of school were drawing near, and while things had mostly quieted, there was still the unresolved matter of Kyle. Serena had seen him around. He had avoided direct confrontation since their last exchange, but she knew it wasn't over. It never was with someone like him. She wasn't naive enough to think that everything was behind her. She had come to terms with the fact that some people weren't just going to let go, and Kyle, with his bruised ego, wasn't going to let her walk out of Hillcrest High without a final attempt at revenge. It happened after school one Friday. Serena had been in the library, finishing up an assignment, when she saw Kyle again. This time, he wasn't alone. He had brought a few of his friends with him. They weren't just standing there, staring at her from across the room. They were blocking her exit. Serena didn't panic. She had learned how to keep her cool in moments like these. She had learned how to read the room, to see things before they happened. And now, standing there in front of her, she saw Kyle's frustration, his desperation. He wasn't just trying to intimidate her. He was trying to regain some of the power he had lost. "Kyle, did you think I'd just let it go, Serena?" Serena looked around, her eyes scanning the library for anyone who might be able to help, but the place was empty except for a few students in the back. She took a deep breath, standing tall as she faced him. "Serena, I never wanted any of this. You're the one who keeps pushing. You've been the one spreading lies. Kyle, you think you can just walk in here and take everything I worked for? The respect, the attention, all of it." Serena remained calm. The familiar feeling of tension crawled up her spine, but she refused to show any signs of fear. "Serena, you've never earned any of it, Kyle. You've taken it from others. But it doesn't matter anymore. Not to me." Kyle's friends looked between each other, unsure of what to do. They had seen how things had gone the last time, and they weren't ready to make the same mistake again. But Kyle wasn't done yet. "Kyle, I'm not leaving without an apology. Serena, you're going to give it to me, or I'll make sure you regret it." Serena's body stiffened. The fight she had been avoiding, the one she knew would eventually come, was here. But this time, there was no need to throw a punch. She wasn't the same person who had walked into Hillcrest months ago. She wasn't going to let Kyle's threats control her. "Serena, you don't get to tell me what to do anymore. You don't get to control how this ends." Her voice was steady, her posture unwavering. Kyle's fists clenched. He took a step toward her, but just as quickly, Serena moved, stepping aside with fluid motion out of his way. It was like she had already anticipated his next move. She had already won the battle. "Serena, this is the last time, Kyle. If you want to keep going, fine. But I'm not backing down anymore." Kyle paused, his anger giving way to something else, a recognition of what Serena had become. He wasn't just facing a girl he could bully anymore. He was facing someone who had found her strength. And in that moment, Kyle realized that he couldn't control her. Not anymore. He stood there, seething, but there was nothing left to say. His friends shifted uncomfortably, realizing the same thing. With one last glare at Serena, Kyle turned and walked out of the library, his friends following reluctantly behind him. Serena stood there for a moment, letting the silence settle around her. Her heart was pounding, but it wasn't from fear. It was from the exhilaration of having finally faced him down, having finally taken control of her story. For the first time in a long time, Serena felt at peace. The next few days at Hillcrest High were different. The lingering tension that had followed Serena wherever she went seemed to vanish. The students who had been afraid to speak to her now greeted her with nods of approval. The whispers had turned into quiet admiration. And though she didn't crave it, Serena found herself accepting it. She had earned this respect. And for the first time, she allowed herself to feel the weight of her accomplishments. But the most surprising thing was how Kyle's friends began to distance themselves from him. They no longer followed him around, no longer laughed at his jokes or fed his ego. Slowly, they began to realize that they had been following the wrong person all along. Serena hadn't just proven herself in the physical sense. She had shown them something far more important: strength in character, resilience, and dignity. One afternoon, as Serena walked to the hallways, she caught sight of Ethan, one of Kyle's old friends, standing alone by his locker. His head was down, and for the first time, he looked like he didn't belong to the crowd that had once surrounded him. Serena slowed her pace, considering whether to say anything to him. She had never sought out enemies, and while Ethan wasn't the ringleader, he had been part of the group that had made her life difficult. Still, something in his expression made her hesitate. Serena stopped beside him. "Serena, you don't have to follow him, you know." Ethan looked up in surprise, his face a mix of guilt and uncertainty. He didn't respond immediately, just staring at her as if trying to figure out what she was doing there. "Serena, you don't have to be part of this anymore. Kyle doesn't control you." Ethan opened his mouth, but then closed it, unable to find the right words. Finally, he nodded, his shoulders slumping as if a weight had been lifted from him. "Ethan, I didn't know what I was doing. I just followed. I guess I thought it was easy that way. But I see now. I see you now. You're not the villain. I was wrong." Serena nodded, offering him a small smile. "Serena, it's okay. We all make mistakes." With that, she walked away, leaving Ethan standing there with a newfound understanding of who Serena really was. As the school year drew to a close, Serena's life at Hillcrest High seemed to settle into something she hadn't anticipated. She had started as a new girl, quiet, distant, and alone, but now she was leaving as someone entirely different. Not just someone who had survived, someone who had thrived. The final day of school came, and Serena walked across the stage to collect her diploma, the weight of the moment not lost on her. This was the end of one chapter, but she knew it was also the beginning of something new. She had found her voice. She had found her power. And now, she was ready to take on whatever came next. As she stood in the back of the auditorium, watching her classmates celebrate, Talia found her again, standing beside her with a proud smile on her face. "Talia, you did it. You really did it." Serena smiled back, her heart swelling with pride. "Serena, we did it." They stood there together, knowing that, no matter what happened next, Serena had already proven that she was unstoppable. The day after graduation, Serena sat alone in her room, her gaze drifting toward the window as the last few rays of sunlight streamed through the blinds. The excitement of the ceremony had faded, and the weight of the past few months, of everything she had faced, finally seemed to settle around her. She had made it. She had fought through the obstacles, stood up to bullies, and reclaimed her narrative. But as she looked out the familiar street outside her window, she felt something else, the promise of a new beginning. Graduation day had been surreal. The cheers of her classmates, the congratulatory hugs, the photos. She had never imagined this moment would come so soon, let alone that she'd walk across the stage with a sense of peace she hadn't known she was capable of. The girl who had entered Hillcrest High a year ago, unsure of herself and overwhelmed by the challenges ahead, was not the same person who was leaving. She had become someone stronger, someone who had learned to embrace her quiet power. And she hadn't done it alone. Her phone buzzed on the desk beside her, snapping her from her thoughts. It was a message from Talia. "Talia, congratulations, Serena. I'm so proud of you. I knew you could do it. Let's celebrate soon, okay?" Serena smiled, tapping out a quick reply. "Serena, thanks, Talia. Couldn't have done it without you. We'll definitely celebrate. I'm just taking a moment to reflect on everything." As Serena set the phone down, she thought about the moments that had shaped her over the last year. From the first day at Hillcrest High, when she had been a quiet outsider, to standing up to Kyle and his friends, to the unexpected support she had received from Talia and even from some of her classmates. Every experience had brought her closer to the person she was now. She thought about Kyle, too. The anger, the pride, the bullying, all of it had been his way of trying to hold onto something that wasn't real. And while he had made her life difficult, she couldn't help but feel a sense of understanding. He, too, was someone who'd been driven by insecurity, by a need to feel important. Serena had no more desire to fight him than she did to fight the stereotypes others had placed on her. She had learned that the only fight worth fighting was the one for herself, standing tall and staying true to who she was. Serena looked down at the black belt she had placed on her desk earlier in the week. It was a symbol of her journey, not just in martial arts, but in life. It reminded her of the lessons she had learned, both on and off the mat, the power of patience, the importance of resilience, and the quiet strength of knowing when to fight and when to walk away. She picked it up, running her fingers over the smooth fabric. The belt was more than just a physical item. It represented every moment she had spent training, every challenge she had faced, and every victory she had claimed. It was a reminder that she had never been weak, not in the way Kyle and the others had seen her. The sound of the front door opening pulled her from her thoughts, followed by the familiar voice of her mother calling from downstairs. "Mom, Serena, you home?" Serena smiled, the warmth of her mother's voice grounding her. She stood up, tucked the belt back into its place, and walked downstairs. Her mom was sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of tea in hand. She looked up and smiled when she saw Serena. "Mom, how was graduation, sweetheart?" Serena sat down beside her mom, leaning back in her chair, content for the first time in a long while. "Serena, it was great. I can't believe it's finally over." "Mom, I'm so proud of you." "Serena, I know it wasn't easy, but you've come a long way. I can see it. You've changed." Serena nodded, feeling a lump form in her throat. It had been hard, but it had been worth it. The struggles, the bullying, the fears, it had all led to this moment. She wasn't the same person who had walked into Hillcrest High. She was stronger, more confident, and more certain of herself. "Serena, I have changed, Mom. I think I'm finally okay with who I am. I'm not afraid of what people think anymore." Her mom reached over, giving her a gentle hug. It was a quiet moment, but it was everything Serena needed. "Mom, you've always been strong. Serena, sometimes it just takes time to see it. I'm proud of everything you've accomplished." Serena pulled back, smiling through the emotions she didn't always let herself feel. "Serena, thanks, Mom. I'm just getting started." The following weeks were a whirlwind of celebrations and goodbyes. Serena spent more time with Talia, catching up on everything they had missed over the school year. They celebrated their victories, their friendships, and the new beginnings they both had ahead of them. Serena had already received offers from a few colleges, but for the first time, she wasn't rushing into a decision. She had spent so long trying to get through high school, trying to make it out without losing herself. Now that she was here, she realized she wanted to take her time to explore, to figure out what she truly wanted for her future. One evening, as she sat on the porch with Talia, the conversation turned to what lay ahead. "Talia, so what's next for you, Serena? You've got your whole future ahead of you." "Serena, I'm still figuring that out. I've got a few options, but I think I need to take a step back first, breathe a little, see where life takes me." "Talia, whatever you choose, I'll be right here. We've been through too much together for me to go anywhere now." Serena smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the summer evening air. "Serena, I know, and that means more than you know." As the sun set behind them, Serena realized that while the past year had been full of challenges, it had also been full of growth. She had faced her fears, found her strength, and learned how to stand tall. And no matter what came next, she knew she would always carry that with her. No longer the quiet, unsure girl she once was, but a woman who knew exactly who she was and what she was capable of. Serena stood on the edge of a new chapter. She wasn't sure where life would take her, but she was ready for it. The struggles she had faced, the bullies she had confronted, the lies she had defeated, all of it had shaped her into someone she was proud of. And as the next chapter of her life unfolded, Serena knew one thing for sure. She was never going to let anyone take away her power again. The world was waiting, and Serena Davis was ready to meet it head on.